Welcome. This is our Key to Life Chiropractic Orientation class. The reason I invited you here is I want to talk to you about how you can live longer, how you can live better. I want to talk to you about how you can improve the quantity and the quality of your life. Now, a lot of people think that the most important thing that we do as a chiropractor is to give you the adjustment. And while that is extremely important, the most important thing that we do at this office is this orientation class. That's why in the very near future I will be requiring all of my patients to watch this video. And I want everyone to understand what chiropractic is all about, because most people that come into the office don't really have a clue what chiropractic is and what it is all about. They have some vague idea that chiropractic is a way to treat a backache or a stiff neck or whatever else is ailing them. And that's just not the best way to utilize chiropractic. Almost everyone is here for the same reason, however, and that is that they have some kind of a problem with your health. And it was either pain or disease, but it interfered with your ability to live life the way you want to and to live life to the fullest. And maybe someone told you that I might be able to help you. One of the things that I want you to learn today is that I have never cured anybody of anything. All I have ever done in this practice of mine is to locate and correct vertebral subluxations. And I'll be explaining to you exactly what that means as we go on today. That's one of the things that you'll be learning. So what we're going to learn and talk to you about today is, what is my problem? And can chiropractic help me? And what caused it to happen in the first place? And along the way we'll even teach you the benefits of chiropractic for people that have no symptoms. Some people say I believe in chiropractic and others say I don't believe in chiropractic, but quite honestly I don't care if you believe in it or not. What I require and what I want you to do is understand what chiropractic is. Chiropractic is not a religion that you believe in. I mean, it's kind of like gravity. It's more like a law than it is a religion, because I mean, if you jump off the Empire State Building and when you hit bottom, you're going to go splat. That's gravity. And if you've got bones out of a line in your spine and we correct that, that's chiropractic, okay? And that gets your brain communicating better with the rest of your body. So there's a lot of facts that we need to know. And research, this is some interesting stuff. Research says that most of us have the capacity to make it well into our early 90s. And largely without chronic disease. And this year over 70,000 Americans will reach their 100th birthday. God created you in His image to live a life of health and vitality, full of strength and energy and empowerment from birth to death. So what happened? Your body stopped functioning properly and you wound up with a pain or disease. And how? Why? A lot of it is environmental. Our society is really overstressed, overexhausted, overmedicated, overfed and undernourished, overinformed, undermoved, toxic, and subluxated. There's that word again. We're going to talk a lot about subluxation. And I want you to understand what subluxations are. But do you know anybody like this? You know, somebody that's stressed out, exhausted, just tired of being tired? So how many of those rocks are in your backpack? That kind of says it all there, that slide, doesn't it? There's different levels of life and health, and you can be well or you can be not sick. Do you want your kids to be smart or just not dumb? I personally would rather have radiant health and be vital and not just not sick. So what controls every function in your body? It's your brain, isn't it? The life flows from your brain. It flows down the spinal cord, and life flows out through the spinal nerves, and it flows to every cell in your body. The body is just an amazing organism, and if you look at some of the things that it's astounding. Right from the beginning, when the egg is fertilized, 7 hours after that, the cells start lining up and forming a rudimentary brain. They call it the primitive streak. And this ends up becoming your brain and your spinal cord. By the 24th day, there is already a heart forming. By the 36th day, eye buds are forming. And of course, by 9 months, we've got a fully functioning human being. And it's just incredible to me. Does that power, that intelligence, that innate intelligence that you had that made the body, does that leave you when you're born? I really don't think so. You know, here's some other facts about our body. Your body makes 50 million cells a minute. Your liver makes 200,000 enzymes. Your heart beats 100,000 times a day. Blood is pumped through 60,000 miles of vessels. Your brain sends 3 trillion signals a second down your spinal cord to run, regulate, and heal your body. And 3 trillion signals a second come from your body back up to your brain. I mean, that's quite a superhighway. You think about it. Trillions of signals per second running up and down your spinal cord. That spinal cord, of course, is housed within the spine, and that's why it's called the spinal cord. So let's stop and take a little look at the spine here. The spine is made up of vertebra, which are the bones in the spine. That's made up of discs, which are the cushions that go in between the vertebra. We also have spinal nerves that exit the spine, and the spinal cord itself runs right behind the body of the vertebra all the way up and down the spine. There are 7 cervical vertebrae, 12 thoracic vertebrae in the middle of the back, and 5 lumbar vertebrae down in the lower back. And below that, of course, is the sacrum and the coccyx. There are 27 pairs of these spinal nerves that exit the spine and go to every single cell in your body. This is the superhighway that the brain sends all of its signals down to the rest of the body with. And whenever we have a misalignment of those bones, when you look over here, you see this vertebra misaligned compared to normal here. It's pinching nerves, causing wear and tear on the discs and the vertebrae themselves. Whenever you have that, that's what we call a subluxation. So a subluxation then is simply a misalignment of the bones in the spine. This misalignment pinches nerves and interferes with the brain's ability to send messages effectively. So if you have a nerve in your neck that is pinched, that's going to your heart, and your heart is only getting 70% of the information that your brain is trying to send it, is your heart going to be as healthy as it should be? Or is it going to start to develop over time a disease? Maybe high blood pressure, maybe arrhythmias, or any other number of maladies that can affect your heart. So to answer the very first question I said we were going to talk about was, what is your health problem? Your health problem is the subluxation. If I invited you to this class, that means I found a subluxation or suspect that you may have one. And if a friend invited you, they probably have suffered from the effects of a subluxation and suspected that you may have one too. But I want you to understand, we do not treat disease. I don't treat pain, I don't treat disease, I don't treat any kind of named conditions. All I do at this office is very, very simply locate and correct spinal subluxations. Spinal subluxations are what cause the vast majority of all of the conditions that you can get. So we're not going after the symptom, we're going after the cause. can we help you? If we detect a subluxation through any of our number of means of doing that, and we can find subluxations by palpating your spine, by feeling up and down the spine. If we feel a subluxation, we call that through palpation. I'll also be checking your range of motion. If you have an aberrant or unusual range of motion, let's say when you bend forward you can only go so far, but going backward you can go normally. We still call that an unusual or abnormal range of motion. We check tipping side to side and twisting. All of those motions, there are certain amounts of that you should be able to do. And if you're unable to do them properly, then we know that something is wrong. Usually, again, that goes right back to a subluxation. We also check your posture. If you are constantly tipping with your head off to one side or off to the other side, or you have one shoulder that's much higher than the other, or one hip that's much higher than the other, all of these things are clues that show us where we can start looking for subluxations. So we have palpation, range of motion, gait, posture. These are just some of the tools. And if we can't find out enough information just from our exam that way, then we can always fall back on some of the other things like X-ray and ultrasound and MRI if it's real serious or something. But most of the time, 98% of the time, I can detect the subluxations without any of the invasive studies that a lot of people have you do. So what causes these subluxations? The number one cause of subluxations is stress. Now, stress comes in 3 different flavors, and just about everybody can immediately think of, well, yeah, if I fall down and land on my butt or get hit or have any kind of an accident, that's physical stress. That's really understandable, and most people think of, that's how most people think that subluxations come. But there's also mental stress. Whenever you're mentally stressed out, what do you see people do? The minute they get stressed, boom, up their shoulders come. Their muscles tighten up, they get tight all over, and that pulls your spine out of place. That motion or that tightness of the musculature pulling on your spine creates those subluxations at times. The third type is one that many people don't even think about, and that's chemical stress. We're surrounded by chemicals these days. In our cleaners, in our cosmetics, in our toothpaste, in our drinking water, there's chemicals nowadays. And just look at the back of a label of some of the foods that we eat. Many of them you can't even pronounce. So chemical stress causes problems with your organs, and the organs then react, and we have what we call a viscerosomatic reaction. That viscerosomatic reaction causes tightness in the musculature. That tightness in the musculature tends to pull the vertebra out of alignment again. Usually chemical stress will show up in the mid-back, in the area between your neck and your stomach. And the physical or accidental stress type of things, that usually shows up in the low back. That's where people have a lot of their low back trouble coming from. And the mental stress, that usually shows up in the neck and shoulders and upper back. And you can see a lot of those things that, when somebody's really stressed out mentally and they get big misalignments in their neck and upper back, that affects their heart and their lungs a great deal. And chemical stress tends to affect the digestive organs, and physical stress tends to really affect the lower back and the legs a lot. So how do you stop that? Stress and subluxation are really the cause of most of the diseases. So if we have a muscle spasm and it pulls a vertebra out of alignment, we've got a subluxation. If we take care of it right at that point, then we can interrupt this cycle. If we don't take care of it, within 7 to 10 days we have dysfunction. And very, very shortly after that, we'll start seeing disease. And that causes more stress, which causes more spasm, which gets into a very vicious cycle. So we want to stop that right here before we start getting the dysfunction and the arthritic changes that can become very, very permanent. So we want to stop all of that. And there are things that you can do to help yourself and your family stay healthy. Kind of common sense, everybody should eat well. Eliminate all those chemicals that are in your food that you really don't need in your diet. When you look at the ingredients of food, by far the very best is eating whole foods, so that every food that you eat has one ingredient. And if you look on a package of food and you can't pronounce some of the things that are on there, just don't eat it. Move well, exercise, take some walks, do some stretching. It isn't that terribly hard anymore. Research has shown that 15 minutes of exercise in a day is good if you do it well and you do it right. So thinking well, do you want to be a Patty Positive or a Debbie Downer? There's definitely a huge difference in a positive mental attitude. You see people that are positive all the time, they're more than likely a lot healthier than somebody that's depressed and down all the time. So think well, think positive thoughts. I've had people tell me that they keep a gratitude journal. Every night they sit down and just before going to bed they think about 3 things and write them down in a little journal, what they're thankful for that day. And at very first you'll start coming up with, well, I'm really grateful that I've got a roof over my head. I'm really grateful that I've got food to eat, and I'm really grateful that we have just a wonderful country to live in. And as you go on, and you'll get even more and more detailed about what you're grateful for, and that can become just a wonderful exercise to do that. Try it for a month. You'd be amazed. Myself, I like to pray a lot, and that helps really calm me down, and it works well for me. Stay well adjusted. That's number 1. Get your family's spine checked once a week. And that may sound like a lot, but I'll explain to you why I say once a week real well. And our body heals when we're sleeping. So if you eat a couple of hours before you go to sleep, you will sleep better rather than eating just before you lay down. If you've been moving well during the day so that your muscles are tired, not necessarily sore, but if you're tired, you'll sleep better. When you think positive thoughts or have good, the last thing you think about before you go to sleep is what you will kind of dream about. So it really makes a huge difference. And if you're well adjusted and everything, then you will sleep well. And everybody should get anywhere from 7 to 9 hours per night. Now, why once a week should you get adjusted? This study was done in 1987 by Dr. Wiedemann, and it shows that after just 7 to 14 days of immobilization, we can actually see on X-ray arthritic changes forming in a joint. And even after repeated short periods of loss of motion in a joint, we can start seeing these changes. So once a week is really kind of like the minimum. And some people will go a little bit longer than that and push it, 7 to 10 days. But after 2 weeks of immobilization, there are definite signs of eburnation and other changes in the subchondral bone that basically are arthritis. And if you let all of those things go long enough, it becomes permanent and there is no fixing it. So this next slide shows you what the difference is between a good healthy looking neck where it has a nice smooth curve. We've got good disc spaces in between each vertebra, and the vertebrae themselves are nice and clean. This other picture over here shows that these vertebrae are there's big spurs forming on here, and the disc spaces have gotten real thin. And this person has lost the normal curvature to the neck. So I guarantee you this person has got a lot of health issues that are affected by these bad subluxations that have been there for an extended period of time. When we see bone spurs that size, I know that this person has been subluxated for 15 to 20 years. Now, subluxations, again, are simply misalignments of the vertebra that pinch nerves and affect your brain's ability to communicate properly with the rest of your body. Subluxations, especially in the neck, though, can actually affect much more than just the nerve transmissions. It can even interfere with your cerebrospinal fluid flow, and it can interfere with your blood flow. In the cervical spine, there are two arteries that go up and down the spine on either side. Those are called the vertebral arteries. And if they get pinched, that can affect the blood flow to your brain. And if we also have what we call a stenosis, or a narrowing of the space for the spinal cord, or a stretching of the spinal cord because of a loss of the normal curvature in the neck, that can affect the cerebrospinal flow as well. And I'm going to show you just a real short video here that explains that and shows you exactly what happens pre and post chiropractic adjustment. Oops, let me back that up.
Notice the size of the foramen magnum. Notice the ventricular action. Notice the disc herniations. And notice the cord descending down here over C5, C6. Notice the bulges here and the fluid trying to descend down. This is a stenosis occurring here. And you'll notice that it's much less bright white than the post. When you look at the post in a second, you'll be able to see that it'll be much brighter and much more descending down. And you could see here the focusing of the ventricles. It's almost like a milking type effect. And you notice the change in signal. Now, one of the most amazing things about our research was that even prior to getting to the stage of the flow studies, we were able to show changes of signal intensity. And the increased white that you see is a change in signal intensity. Remember, nothing's changed here except the patient being adjusted, therefore changing the signal intensity interpreted by the MRI magnet. This is the same patient on the post adjustment. Look how much brighter it gets. It bounds at you. 1, surges. 2. If you look down the cord, it's surging down the cord. Her CSF was going barely. Obviously, she was alive, but now she's alive. More importantly, you're seeing here cerebral cortex activity where before was stagnant. And when you have this image, isn't this the image we get and feel after we get a good adjustment? We notice those changes. We feel almost as if this picture is telling us how we feel after we get adjusted. Notice the pulsation. The size of this foramen magnum has opened up tremendously. The disc herniations. And you can see the pulsation descending down here to C6 and C5 area where it wasn't before.
One of the main things that I really got out of this picture is right here where the brain exits the skull. It's called the foramen magnum, and the pre-picture showed that foramen magnum, and it was really pinched down, and it got much wider right after the adjustment. And that increased signal intensity that we're talking about in the cortex of the brain, the reason that signal was so much more bright is because following an adjustment, the body is more able to communicate with the rest of the body. So you remember I was telling you there was 3 trillion signals per second going up and down the spine? When you have a big misalignment like that and it's cutting off that much, it can actually slow your whole nervous system down by up to 30%. And you stop and think about it. If instead of getting 3 trillion seconds, it's only getting 2 trillion signals per second, That's going to make a huge difference in the amount of activity in the cortex of your brain. Amazing stuff. Now there's 4 essentials of life, aren't there? We all have to have food, we've got to have water, we've got to have air, and we've got to have a nerve supply. You can tell how important each of these are by how long you can live without them. Food you can live without for a few weeks. Water you can live without for a few days. Air you can live without for a few minutes. But you can't even live a few seconds without a nerve supply. You cut off your nerve supply and you're done. That's it. And that's what chiropractic is concerned about. We want to make sure that we optimize your nerve supply at all times. This is Doris. Doris is my mom. In 2002, she had a heart attack, and she was unconscious, on life support. She was intubated. They had her hooked up to an iron lung, so they were breathing for her, feeding her with tubes and everything. And she laid in the hospital unconscious for 4 days with no normal heart rhythm. And after that 4 days, the cardiologist came in and he said to our family, he said, "You better gather everybody around because Doris won't make it until morning." And I asked the doc, I said, "Is there nothing else you can do?" And he said, "No, I'm sorry, there's nothing more that we can do." And I said, "Well, then it won't hurt if I try something." So I waded through all of the tubes and wires and everything else they had her hooked up to, and got a hold of her head and checked her neck, and sure enough she had a couple of misalignments way up high in her neck, C1 and C2, and those subluxations were very prominent. So I adjusted them, and immediately up on the heart monitor, boop, 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 here comes a normal sinus rhythm. She hadn't had one of those for 4 days. That cardiologist's jaw nearly hit the floor. He says, "What in the world did you do?" And I said, "Well," I said, "it's kind of like rebooting a computer. Let's see how long it lasts. You know, her brain is trying to communicate with her heart." And it stayed good for about 20 minutes, and then she went out of normal rhythm again, and our hearts just fell. But I went back in there and I adjusted her again, and everything came right back up. Boop, 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 normal sinus rhythm. We thought, wow, this is great. And I kept an eye on her, and about an hour later it went out of rhythm, and I adjusted her again. A couple hours later it went out, I adjusted her again. I kept an eye on her for 36 hours, and every single time she went out of normal rhythm, I'd go in and adjust her neck again. And after 36 hours, my brother came and I said, "It's your turn to watch Mom for a while." I said, "I got to go take a nap." I came back 8 hours later, and here's Mom sitting up in bed writing notes to the nurses saying she wanted some water. And they said, "Well, you can't have any water. You're intubated. We have to wait for the doctors to pull the tubes out." So she wrote them another note and asked them for something else, and the minute they left the room, she pulled the tubes out herself. And when they came back in, she said, "Now give me some water." And we knew Mom was back. Anyway, the reason that I'm telling you this story is that it illustrates the biggest question that I get, and that is, why do you have to adjust me more than once? Can't you just find it and fix it? And I always like to tell everybody, you know, the body is used to these vertebrae being in the wrong position. So all the muscles, the ligaments, the tendons, everything in your body is used to it being out of place. And it's going to pull that vertebra back out of alignment again. And it requires multiple times to push that vertebra back into place before the muscles, ligaments, and tendons heal in the correct position. So it takes time. Chiropractic generally gets people feeling better so much faster. They think that, you know, they're invincible. They figure out, you know, well, I feel great, I should be able to do everything. And it isn't always that way, because a lot of times these tissues have been damaged, and and they're not quite as strong as they were before there was scar tissue that was forming and everything else. So repeated adjustments over a period of time is what allows the body to fully heal. And that's why just one adjustment doesn't very often do the trick. Okay, so who should be under care? My whole family is under care. I adjusted my son when he was a half hour old. I adjusted my oldest patient in his home at 106, and so you're never too old or too young for chiropractic care. And I just love adjusting children. That's the very best thing you can do for a child, is get them regularly adjusted, because when we adjust a child, we're preventing problems, and it's so much easier. After you're an adult and you've had these problems for years, to try to correct those kind of problems, much, much more difficult. And you know, if you keep all of these subluxations under control and adjusted from a very young age, your nervous system is continuously functioning at a very high level. And the more you live with subluxations, the more interference the brain has, the less healthy you will be in the long run. So our mission basically is to detect and correct as many subluxations as we can in a fun and caring and safe environment. And I want to restore and maintain the health of our community, beginning with you and your family and your friends. So the way that you can help the most is by referring your friends and family and teaching them what chiropractic is. Don't go and tell your friend that, hey, go see Doc Wayne, he fixed my headache just like that, or he fixed my neck pain, or he fixed my back pain. I didn't do any of those things. All I've ever done is detect and correct a vertebral subluxation. And a vertebral subluxation is very simply a vertebra that has shifted out of place and twisted off to one side or the other, pinches a nerve, and that affects the ability of that nerve to communicate what it needs to from the brain to the parts of the body that it serves. So chiropractic is nothing more than an art and science that takes and pushes that vertebra back into correct position and alignment, taking the pressure off of the nerve so that your body can heal better. So make sure when you refer your friends and family that you say, hey, go to Dr. Wayne. He will adjust your spine. He will get your nervous system functioning well, and you will heal better. Okay? We don't always feel better immediately, but we do always heal better immediately. I want to thank you for your time, and I hope you learned a whole lot on this little presentation, and if you ever have any questions, be sure and give me a call. Thank you.